Hey there, this is Jacques from Heroes and Legends, and welcome to day 4 of official Eldritch Moon spoilers. Now, if you've been watching this series of videos, you know we've seen a lot of amazing cards so far from this set. Today we have 11 brand new cards to take a look at, so without any further ado, let's jump in and see what we got. We're going to start off with a card that was a French language spoiler, loosely translated, Decimator of Provinces. This costs 10, it's an Eldrazi boar with an emerge cost of 3 green and a 6. When you cast Decimator of Provinces, creatures you control get +2/+2 and gain trample until end of turn. This is also a 7/7 that has haste and trample. So let's talk about standard first with this card. It's kind of in an awkward place. Here's the problem with it. I like Emerge a lot. I think Emerge is a very powerful mechanic, and it could definitely force this card to see a little bit of play. It is a very powerful card. I don't want to count it out totally. But the fact of the matter is, basically you want to run this in ramp deck, and if you're ramping, especially nowadays, or maybe in the old days where ramp was more about mana dorks, today it's more about instants and sorceries that are helping you find your mana. In today's environment, this just isn't quite as good. If I'm ramping towards something big, I'm probably just going to ramp towards, say, Ulamog or one of the Titans, as opposed to trying to get to this. So I don't know if it really has a place right now in the standard metagame. Perhaps post-rotation it could play a bigger role depending on what pieces we get in the next set. However, right now it just feels a little bit awkward, maybe a little bit out of place for this meta. As far as Commander goes, however, this is a fantastic card for Commander. Now, the easy comparison here is Craterhoof Behemoth, which is really, really good. It's actually on paper a little bit better than this card. However, that's okay because this card is still a bomb in Commander. If you're able to get this into play and just pump all your small creatures and just get in there with trample damage, you're going to be able to take an opponent out. And the fact that it has the emerge cost, especially in Commander, this becomes a huge benefit in a format where you're already going to be able to play some pretty big creatures and you have a little more time to execute your plan. I like it a lot. As far as limited goes, it's still going to be really good for you in limited. The only thing is you're going to want to make sure that you have a deck that's going to be able to get it out and get it out at least in a timely manner. So you probably want to have a very nice curve of creatures leading up to this, and maybe you can get rid of your 4-drop in the late portion of the game to play this and just go in for an alpha strike. It could be very, very powerful there. I mean, it is a mythic. You know it's going to have a high power level, especially in limited. Next we have a card that was spoiled from a Japanese language spoiler. It's Eternal Scourge. Costs 3, Eldrazi Horror, and you may cast this from exile. When this becomes a target of a spell or an ability an opponent controls, exile it, and it's a 3/3. Now, let's talk about standard first with this one. I don't really think this has a place in standard, unfortunately, at this point. It's very economical. I mean, 3/3 for 3 is good, but there's just so many more aggressive, cheap creatures out there that we see in like the White Humans deck and the Green-White deck right now that I don't think it's going to really hang with them in the metagame currently. Where this is going to get interesting is in formats like Commander and maybe even Legacy, because this combos with Food Chain. Now, there is a combo currently with Food Chain and Mistveil Griffin, which the Griffin costs 2 blue and 2 generic, but it does create a combo that gives you infinite mana. Well, this does the same thing, but it only costs 3 generic. So I think this will kind of take that card's place in that combo. That's pretty amazing. Lastly, limited. This is a good limited card. I like getting a 3/3 for 3. I think it's very economical, and it will do you very well in limited, regardless of its other ability. Next, we have Wharf Infiltrator. Now, this was Tolarian Community College's preview card, so if you haven't watched the video, check out the professor's videos. He always does incredible work when he gets a preview card, so this is amazing. So please watch it when you get a chance. It's phenomenal. You'll be glad you did. But this costs 1 blue, 1 generic. It's a human horror, 1/1. This is also a rare with Skulk. And whenever this deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card. If you do, discard a card. Whenever you discard a creature card, you may pay 2. If you do, put a 3/2 colorless Eldrazi Horror creature token on the battlefield. Now, this is actually deceptively powerful. Let's talk about limited. This is probably where this card is going to shine the most. You get to play this on turn 2. And if your opponent doesn't have a small creature to block with, you get to get in and loot every turn. And on top of it, if you have other cards that work well with the loot, so maybe you have some madness cards in your deck, but even if you don't, you can get some value off discarding a creature that maybe you can get value out of later, perhaps in your graveyard, and you still can get a creature out of it for paying 2. You get the 3/2 Eldrazi Horror. That's actually very good, and your opponent is in this weird position now that they're going to either have to find a way to get rid of this 1/1 and waste the removal on it, or they're going to have to find a small creature to block and then hope you don't have a way of getting rid of that creature. You can really start to garner a lot of advantage with a card like this very quickly. It seems quiet, it seems innocuous, but it can be very, very strong. As far as standard goes, right now I don't really see a home for it. However, we're seeing a lot of pieces to this. Is it tempo deck that they're trying to give us in this set? And we haven't seen the whole set yet, so it's hard to say if the pieces are going to be strong enough to hang in a very aggressive meta. But if the deck is good, whether it's right now or post-rotation, then this will definitely be a part of that deck. Next we have a reprint. It's Murder, 2 black, 1 generic. It's an instant, uncommon, destroy target creature. Now, the first time this was printed, it was a player in standard. This will be a player in standard again. This is actually maybe even better in this standard than it was the first time it was printed, just because black really needs an instant non-conditional removal spell, and it finally got one, and here it is. So this is going to be great. It's just another piece that really makes me feel like they're trying to give black a little more power, a little more push, which makes sense. And if you're going to do that, this is the set to do it. This is the set about black kind of being the hero, so I think they're going to get some good cards. We saw some great cards yesterday, and it almost feels like they're trying to set up some combos with black and maybe black red or black blue, and this is the type of card that's going to allow you to buy time to get to those combos. Now, having said that, yes, this will see standard play, but does that mean there'll be a true standard control deck? I'm not convinced of that yet. I hope we can get there, but I don't know if we've seen all the pieces yet of a control deck that's either blue or blue-black that's going to be able to stand up to the very aggressive meta that we have right now. Now, on top of that, everyone knows Murder is also a very fine card in Limited. You'll be very, very, very happy to play it there, and it's uncommon, so watch for these going around in the draft. Next, we have Strom Kirk Condemned, 2 black. It's a vampire horror, 2/2. This one's also a rare. Discard a card. Vampires you control get +1/+1 till end of turn. Activate this ability only once each turn. Now, yesterday or the day before, I think I said that vampires haven't really gotten there in standard, and part of the reason was we just haven't had enough low curve vampires. We have some pretty nice mid-range ones, but no low curve. Well, here's a low curve vampire. The only thing that's a little awkward about this, though, is it's 2 black. And on color, it makes it a little slower. So you might be able to think of this more as a 3 or 4 drop as opposed to a true 2 drop, which doesn't make it quite as good and isn't exactly what that deck needs. But it is a step in the right direction. So if we can get more low curve 2 drop, 3 drop vampires, maybe we'll have something to play around with. I'd love to see a Madness black-red vampire deck be a thing in the standard meta, but I think we need more parts for it to really get there and be super competitive. Now, having said that, this is going to be very good for you in Limited. It is a discard outlet. It works very well with Madness, works very well with vampires. Even if you don't have a lot of vampires, this thing still pumps itself. Again, just think of it more of a 3 or 4 drop than a 2 drop because it's on color, but it will be a good card for you, and I think it'll be fine in Commander if you're going with a vampire theme too. Next, we have Whispers of Emrakul, 1 black and a generic. It's a sorcery, uncommon. Target opponent discards a card at random, and if you have Delirium instead, they discard 2 cards at random. So, first, let me say this about the card. I'm very excited to see target opponent discards a card at random. It's been a very long time, I feel like, since they printed a random discard spell. And random discard can be incredibly powerful. Now, a lot of people compare this to Hymn to Turok, because if you have Delirium, it basically is a Hymn to Turok. However, you do want to remember that the reason Hymn to Turok is good is because you can play it on turn 2, sometimes even turn 1, and it can really decimate your opponent's hand. If you hit their lands, that could be game over. Later in the game, Hymn to Turok isn't quite as exciting when you draw it. Now, the Hymn to Turok ability isn't really going to get turned on here until you get to probably turn 4, turn 5 at best, right? So that really takes the power level of this card down quite a bit. Now that it's completely unplayable and limited, I might run it just because it's still very cheap and economical, but I really am going to want to have more of a control build if I run this and not an aggressive build, so it's not always going to make my cut. Having said that, I think it's a little inconsistent, unfortunately, currently for the standard environment. Standard environment, I think, is just too fast for this card right now and too economical. So, I don't know, kudos to Wizards for going with the discard at random, but it looks like they intentionally held it back a little bit so it didn't get too powerful. Next we have Harmless Offering, maybe my favorite card of the day. 1 red, 2 generic, it's a sorcery, this is a rare, target opponent gains control of target permanent you control. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room, that basically this is a red Donate. Now Donate is a blue card, and the wording's a little different on Donate, but spiritually this is a successor to Donate. Donate is actually on the reserve list, but this card, much like Donate, can be extremely powerful. Let's talk about standard first. Basically, you just want to find something that can combo with this and really give your opponent a bad day. There are cards out there. The most obvious one is probably Demonic Pact, right? If you can give your opponent a Demonic Pact and let that go off, they lose the game. That's kind of awesome, right? So I have no doubt in my mind someone's going to try to brew that. I think the big question is, can you make that happen fast enough in this current standard meta, which is pretty quick and aggressive right now? If there's more control elements out there, and we're starting to see them with cards like Murder, for example, then maybe it is a thing. So it's a little too early to call it, but I'm sure someone's going to try to break it, and I would love to see it. I think that would be actually kind of cool. As far as other formats go, I could list cards all day that combo with this thing, so I'm not going to waste your time and do that, but leave your favorite combos with a card like this in the comments below, because I would like to see some. I'm sure you'll all think of some that even I didn't think of, but there's tons of cards. You get to Modern, you can think of cards all day long, right? There's bunches of cards that say you can't play a creature, you can't play a land, you take 2 damage every turn, so on and so forth. You just donate those over to your opponent, and there you have it. It can really mess up their game quite a bit. So there's just endless things you can do with this card, and of course if you can do them in Modern, you know you can do that in much more in Commander, right? So this will be another huge Commander card as well. As far as Limited goes, I'm not really sure, maybe I'm forgetting something, if there's a card that really combos well with this at this point. I mean, maybe eventually we'll see something else spoiled that works really well with this, and I probably am forgetting something, but if I am, definitely put it in the comments below. So I don't know if it's going to be fantastic for you there, but it's going to do a lot in a lot of different formats. Now once you get out of Modern, I mean, Legacy already has Donate, so I don't know if they need this on top of it, but there it is if you want it. Next we have Eldritch Evolution, 2 green and a generic. This is a rare sorcery, and as additional cost you have to sacrifice a creature. Search your library for a creature card with converted mana cost X or less, where X is 2+ the sacrificed creature's converted mana cost. Put that card onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library and exile this card. So it does exile, you can't start an endless loop or anything like that with it. This card reminds me a little bit of Birthing Pod in some ways, or kind of like a cheaper version of Court of Calling, that type of card. And I think it's still pretty good. I just like the fact that it only costs 3. I think this could find a home in Modern, maybe in a Kiki Core deck. I think it could see some Standard play, maybe Collected Company, but I think there's definitely a deck in Standard that's going to try to use a card like this. This will be great for you in Limited as well. It's a very cheap sorcery. It's going to help you cheat out a larger creature a little sooner than you normally could, and get some value out of it. So I really like this one a lot. I think it's good for Commander too. Next we have Grapple with the Past, 1 green, 1 generic. It's an instant. Put the top 3 cards of your library into your graveyard. Then you may return a creature or land card from your graveyard to your hand. This is phenomenal. I just love, Golgari has a lot of these, right? They have these cards that are allowing you to just populate your graveyard, and then you also can get a little bit of card selection at the same time. They almost feel like quasi-ponders in some ways. This is another one. It's going to be great. I think it's definitely good enough to be Standard playable as long as the deck's looking to populate the graveyard, and I think this will be great in a lot of decks in Limited. Now, it's not always what you're trying to do in your Limited strategy, but if you're trying to populate your graveyard in Delirium, for example, this is going to be fantastic for you. And the last thing I want to say about this card is kind of a callback to a card from Innistrad with, I can't remember the name of the card now, unfortunately, but it's a little girl and she had a teddy bear at the well. And I think the Eldrazi is actually the little girl, which is kind of sad and amazing at the same time. So I love the callbacks that they're doing to the original Innistrad. And if anyone remembers the name of the card, please put it in the comments below. It's just escaping me right now. Next we have a Lupine Prototype, which costs 2. It's a 5/5 artifact creature, wolf construct, and this can't attack or block unless the player has no cards in hand. Now, on paper, this looks very powerful. I mean, a 5/5 for 2 is amazing, but you are jumping through a few hoops to really turn this on, and that's where it gets a little bit awkward. Now, again, we haven't seen the full set, so maybe there's going to be other things that are going to help you get hellbent or help maybe get your opponent to run out of cards. but right now I don't really see enough for this to be consistent in standard, sadly, because I think this is a really cool, flavorful card. Having said that, this will see Commander play if no other reason. It's a very cool, flavorful card. I mean, look at that art, and I think there's more opportunity in Commander to play random cards that will allow you to get Hellbent. There are some Hellbent commander decks out there that could play something like this and get a little bit of value out of it. Also, you have a greater chance of one of your opponents being Hellbent because you'll have multiple opponents in Commander. It's easier to get this to work for you. In Limited, this is going to be a trap some of the time anyway. If your deck can't consistently empty its hand, you probably don't want to go near this thing. Now, if you're playing a really, really strong Madness strategy with a lot of discard effects, then you might be able to pull this off and it could do some work for you, but I think more often than not, people are going to try to make it work and it's not going to do anything, unfortunately. Last card of the day is Geier Reach Sanitarium. This is a legendary land. It's a rare. Tap to add a colorless to your mana pool, or pay 2 and tap. Each player draws a card, then discards a card. Now, this is an interesting one. I think this is actually really powerful, and it's odd because it looks a little innocuous. It looks very even. It looks like you're simultaneously doing something that all your opponents are doing, so really, how do you get an advantage out of it? Well, the answer, I think, is you have to sculpt your deck to get a greater advantage than your opponents will get off of a loot. Now, you do that with cards like Madness, you do that with reanimation effects, you do that with dredge effects. If you're playing those type of decks, this card all of a sudden becomes very good. Also, your opponent can't get Hellbent, because if they do, you're in a situation where you can keep looting and they just get milled, and that's very, very bad for them at that point. So even if you can make them discard that last card or something like that, you can get tons of advantage off this card just by playing it that way. Having said that, I think this will see standard play. I'm not exactly sure where the deck is yet. I mean, maybe there'll be a Madness deck at some point, maybe post-rotation, but I think it's going to be good. I think this could really shine more, though, in Modern and in Commander, where you just have more cards to choose from, a bigger pool of cards, an assorted pool of cards to build from. I do feel like maybe Modern Dredge could try something like this. Could be interesting. Don't know if we'll get there, but I think someone will try to make it work for sure. And Limited, again, be careful with this one. You don't want to necessarily help your opponent sculpt their hand, but again, if you're confident that you're going to get a better advantage than the opponent's going to get, you have to have a really strong like Madness thing going on. But if you do, then I'd run it. I'd try it out. You could always sideboard it out if things go bad in game 1, right? So having said that, those are the cards for today, and we'll be back tomorrow with more spoilers. Then a week from tomorrow will actually be the full set reveal. We'll begin our full set review at that point, but up until then, every day that spoilers come out, we'll have a video for you. So as always, hey, thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, and have a great day.
Hey, thanks as always for watching. This video, like all my videos, was made possible by the generous support of viewers like you on Patreon. Even a donation of $1 helps me to keep growing this community and creating better quality videos for all of you. Check out our Patreon page for exclusive giveaways and future goals for the channel. If you haven't had a chance yet to subscribe, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the MTG news, spoilers, set reviews, product openings, or finance videos on Heroes and Legends. Talk to you again soon, and have a good day.